I'd known Ethan since he was just a kid. I'd watched him grow up, seen him go through every awkward teenage phase. From his braces to his high school graduation. His mother, Claire, was my best friend, so naturally I've been a part of their lives for years. To me, Ethan had always been Claire's son. Nothing more, nothing less. Until recently, it was a lazy Sunday afternoon. The kind where the sun filters in through the curtains just right. And everything feels warm and comfortable. Claire had gone out of town for the weekend. Leaving Ethan alone, she'd asked if I could drop by and check on him, make sure he wasn't living off instant noodles, or turning the house upside down. I agreed, of course. He was 21, now capable of taking care of himself. But old habits die hard when I arrived. Ethan was in the kitchen, making something that smelled surprisingly good. I'd always remembered him as the quiet kid who hid behind his mother at gatherings. But the man standing in front of me now was different, taller, broader and more confident. He turned around when he heard me come in, flashing me that familiar boyish grin. "Hey, Mrs. H," he said, using the nickname he'd given me as a child. Ethan, I smiled, leaning against the counter. "What are you cooking? I didn't know. You could make anything that didn't come out of a microwave." He chuckled, stirring the pot. I picked up a few things over the years. We chatted casually, falling into an easy rhythm like we always did. But something was different this time. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I found myself noticing things I hadn't before. The way his shoulders moved as he cooked. The way his voice had deepened. He wasn't a boy anymore, and that realization hit me harder than I expected. We ended up sitting together in the living room after dinner, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing. I didn't think much of it at first. Just two people spending a quiet evening together. But as the hours wore on, the mood began to shift. It was subtle, but I could feel it in the way Ethan looked at me longer than usual. His gaze lingering just a bit too much. I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just being friendly, but there was something in the air I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it to focus on our conversation. But every time our eyes met, it felt like a spark. At one point, I laughed at something he said, and he smiled back at me in a way that made my heart skip a beat. I brushed it off as nothing, convincing myself I was overthinking things. But the more we talked, the more that tension built between us. It was subtle, unspoken, but it was there, growing with every glance and every casual touch. I knew I shouldn't be feeling this way. Ethan was like family. It was Claire's son. But that night, sitting so close to him, I couldn't deny the chemistry between us. It felt wrong, and yet, a part of me couldn't stop, thinking about how easy it would be to let myself get lost in it. As the night wore on, the house felt smaller. Cozier, like the walls were closing in. Just enough to make me more aware of him. Ethan sat on the couch next to me, his arm resting casually along the back, his fingers just barely brushing against my shoulder. It was innocent enough, nothing out of the ordinary. But my skin tingled where we touched. I was hyper-aware of every little movement, every shift in his posture. We talked about his plans, what he wanted to do after graduation, how he was figuring out life. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my thoughts kept drifting, his voice deeper, now smooth. Held my attention in a way that surprised me. I never noticed it before. How grown up he'd become, and that was the problem. Wasn't it? He wasn't a kid anymore. At some point, I shifted slightly to get more comfortable, and our legs brushed together. I froze for a moment, half expecting him to pull away or make a joke about it. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed right where he was, his leg pressed gently against mine. My heart skipped a beat, and I told myself it didn't mean anything. I was just being overly sensitive. But then he leaned in just slightly and our shoulders touched. The warmth of his body next to mine sent a wave of awareness through me that I couldn't ignore. I could feel the tension building again, thick and heavy in the air between us. This was crossing a line, and I knew it. I should have pulled away, made an excuse to leave, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed there, caught between wanting to maintain the distance and being inexplicably drawn to him. Ethan, I started trying to break the moment, but my voice came out softer than I intended. He turned to look at me, and when our eyes met, I knew he felt it too. That unspoken something between us. It hung there, fragile but undeniable. Yeah, he asked, his voice low, and I could see the question in his eyes. He wasn't a boy anymore. He knew exactly what was happening. And that scared me more than anything. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. We were both aware of the shift. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. But nothing came. I was too close to the edge, and I wasn't sure how to step back. My mind was racing, torn between the logical part of me that knew this was wrong, and the part that was drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. I've known him his whole life, but sitting there feeling his presence so close, he felt like a stranger, a man I hadn't seen before. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering a little too long. I felt my breath catching my throat, and I knew I had to stop this before it went any further. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, caught in the moment, my heart pounding in my chest. His touch was gentle, but it felt like fire against my skin, igniting something I tried to ignore all evening. I shifted slightly, pulling back just enough to put some space between us. But it didn't help. The tension was still there, thick and heavy, and I could feel him watching me, waiting to see what I do next. I stood up abruptly, my heart racing. "I should go," I said, my voice a little too shaky for my liking. Ethan stood up to his eyes, searching mine, and for a moment I thought he was going to say something, maybe try to stop me, but instead he just nodded, slowly stepping back to give me space. "Yeah," he said, his voice softer now. "Maybe that's for the best." I grabbed my purse, avoiding his gaze as I made my way to the door. My heart was still pounding, and I could feel the tension thrumming through my veins. I had to get out of there, away from the heat of the moment, before I did something I couldn't take back. I hurried out of the house, the cool night air hitting me as soon as I stepped outside. It felt like a splash of cold water, waking me up from whatever had almost happened in there. I stood by my car for a moment, my hands trembling as I fumbled with my keys, trying to gather my thoughts. My mind was spinning, replaying every second of the evening. Every touch, every glance. How had I let it get that far? Ethan was my best friend's son. This wasn't supposed to happen. But as I stood there, the weight of the night still heavy on my shoulders, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. It was like a door had been cracked open, and I wasn't sure if I could close it again. I wanted to pretend that it was nothing, just a moment of weakness that meant nothing. But deep down I knew better. There was something between us now, something I hadn't seen coming. Just as I was about to open the car door, I heard the front door of the house open behind me. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned around to see Ethan standing there, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us said anything, the tension still hanging between us. I wanted to tell him to go back inside, to let me leave and forget that this had ever happened. But I couldn't find the words. I didn't know what to say. He took a step toward me, his hands in his pockets. And for a second, I thought he might try to stop me again. My pulse quickened as I braced myself for whatever he was about to say. But then he stopped just a few feet away, his eyes meeting mine. "I didn't mean to," he started, his voice trailing off as if he didn't know how to finish the sentence. I let out a shaky breath, trying to keep my composure. "It's not your fault, Ethan. I should have been the one to stop it before it got complicated." He nodded, his eyes flicking down to the ground. "I know, I don't know what happened tonight." "Neither do I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an explanation for what had happened, and I wasn't sure I wanted one. What I did know was that it couldn't happen again. We stood there in silence for what felt like forever, the space between us filled with all the things we weren't saying. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the same one I was feeling. Part of me wanted to close that distance, to forget about the lines we'd almost crossed, and just let myself give in to whatever this was. But the other part, the rational part, knew that nothing good could come of it. "I think we both need some time to figure this out," I finally said, my voice steadier now. "But nothing can happen between us, Ethan. We can't let it—" He didn't respond right away, just nodded again, his jaw tight. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, and it made my chest tighten. This was the right thing to do. I knew it was, but that didn't make it any easier. "I'll see you around," I said quietly. Turning back to my car, I needed to leave before I changed my mind, before I let myself fall any deeper into something I couldn't control. I got into the car and drove away, the tension slowly fading with each mile that passed. But even as the distance grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Something had shifted, and no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were before. There was no undoing what had happened tonight, no erasing the tension that had built between us. As I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, I sat there for a moment, staring out into the darkness. I knew I had to put this behind me, to forget about the way Ethan had looked at me, the way I'd felt when we were close, but some part of me deep down wasn't ready to let it go. I didn't know what would happen next, or if anything would happen at all. But for now, I had to try and forget. I had to remind myself who I was, and where the lines were supposed to be. Because if I didn't, I knew that next time I might not be strong enough to stop it. Since you enjoyed this video, click on the subscribe button on the bottom right corner of the screen, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this.